Hi, welcome to another episode of Teen Pride Book Talk. My name is Lucy, and this is the program where I spend a few minutes telling you about a young adult book that is both inclusive of and representative of folks in the LGBTQIA plus community. The book that I have chosen today, since this episode will be premiering at the end of October, is a horror novel. It's a debut author, Ryan Douglas, and the name of the book is The Taking of Jake Livingston. This is a book by a Black queer author, and it features a 16-year-old Black queer boy as its main character, and it is written in the tradition of horror noir. So our main character is Jake Livingston, like the title would suggest. He is a 16-year-old and he is a medium. So he sees ghosts and dead people all around him, and he sees particularly how those people died and the loop that they're sort of stuck in between their death and how they let go of that death and get to the next place. So he sees this death being repeated and repeated and repeated. And he sees this all the time, everywhere, in school, at home. As you can imagine, this is distracting, and it takes up a good deal of his mental and visual space. So he finds it very difficult to relate to actual people and to make friends. On top of that, Jake goes to a very exclusive high school called St. Clair Prep, where he is one of a very few Black students. Another Black student there is his older brother, Benji. Benji is cool and popular. He makes his own sets of rules. And this part of the story, having Jake be one of the few Black students at the school, is very important because Jake faces a lot of racism from students, from teachers just ignoring or not calling it out when other students act in a racist manner towards Jake. And Ryan Douglas, the author, is using this to actively condemn academia for its racist practices. So that's a big feature of the book. Then another facet to Jake is that he's gay, but he has not told anybody. He's already struggling with seeing mediums, with being a Black kid in a very white space, and he just feels this is one way where he would not be accepted. Pretty much at the start of the story, this story jumps in right away with the action, and it is a horror book. It does not leave out gore. There's definitely some insect horror, if bugs creep you out, there's going to be some scenes here that are difficult. Ryan Douglas does not hold back in providing this horror for us. Jake, at the beginning of the book, he starts being pursued by a very specific ghost, and this is the ghost of a boy named Sawyer Dune, who went to a high school nearby Jake's high school and actually killed 6 people in his school before turning the gun on himself and killing himself. So that is Sawyer Dune, and he is stuck in a loop, but his loop is a little different because his loop involves trying to track Jake down and wanting to take over Jake's body. Sawyer is not done. He has more that he wants to do, and he says to Jake, I will do better things with your body than you can. So this is another part that really underscores that anti-Black racism. This is an actual example of a white invasion into a Black body, a white controlling of a Black body. So there are all these pieces that are very prevalent where the author is highlighting racism and then later homophobia as well. But at its heart, this is a survival story. Jake is fighting for his life and for his soul. There's an actual ghoul who wants to take over both of those things. What is interesting about this pursuit between Sawyer and Jake is that the chapters of the book alternate between the narrative voices of Jake and then of Sawyer. Because we get both of those points of view, we're able to see more about why Sawyer is doing what he's doing. And those chapters, Sawyer's chapters, are difficult. That point of view is difficult to read, but the author has taken a lot of care to make sure that Sawyer is not a one-dimensional character, and that helps us as readers recognize why he acted the way that he did and what happened to him earlier in his life. So in addition to the characters of Sawyer and Jake, we are also introduced to Alistair, who comes as a new student to St. Clair Prep, and he is Black as well. So Jake is excited to have another Black student as part of the student body, but he also starts to develop a crush on Alistair, and Alistair develops a crush on Jake as well. The author of this book, Ryan Douglas, has written extensively about the lack of representation in publishing specifically for queer Black boys. And the character of Jake addresses this directly in a part where he's imagining what it would be like for him and Alistair to be a couple. And he says, "I couldn't hold hands and walk around school with Alistair like normal couples do, because everybody would judge us harder than they judge white gay boys. White gay boys can be gay because gay is all they are. Alistair and I were Black and gay, and being both would put targets on our heads." Jake's expressing of this really underscores the point that Ryan Douglas is making throughout this book. Dealing with both race and sexuality is a heavy and difficult burden for these boys, and how important it is to have male characters who live in that intersection in publishing so that readers can start to see themselves in the books that they're reading. As I mentioned, his crush on Alistair, there is a little bit of romance in this book, so it's not all horror and doom and gloom. It is a fast-paced survival story. There are no holds barred where it comes to descriptions of what is happening, but at the same time, there is a tiny bit of romance. So it's not over the top. It's just very sweet, a very sweet relationship that develops. It's sort of the perfect amount of romance to put in the end of a book like this. I wanted to speak about this book today because it is scary, but also because it is such a good example of representation. Ryan Douglas has used the supernatural, ghosts, astral projection, and horror to explore anti-Blackness, mental illness, homophobia as experienced by boys, specifically queer Black boys. This author said that he wrote this book in an indirect response to that group of people being underrepresented. He's devoted his work to race, sexuality, and media representation, and he uses this book to help dispel stereotypes around those issues. It's a real page turner, so I would recommend, especially if you enjoy horror, The Taking of Jake Livingston by Ryan Douglas. Thanks for joining me.